Let me talk about church just for a second. Now, almost all of you have some sort of church requirements and questionnaires as you join your organization. The organization asks you, are you a member of a church? Do you do this? Do you do this? Do you do this? Are you part of this? Etc. So there are hoops already in place as you come aboard the missionary enterprise. So one of the perhaps chronic criticisms of the missionary enterprise is the fact that churches don't jump aboard. And I want to talk a little bit as an observer about why I think some of that has happened. Now, some of the reasons are good reasons, some of them are bad reasons, all right? So I'm for the church. I want you to know I'm for the church. Okay. Now, one of the reasons is very simply that as missionaries, we have a sense of expectations that now we become a professional Christian, people ought to snap to it and send us cash. And that is the incorrect methodology to approach a church. You have to put yourself in the mindset of the deacon board or the decision board or the pastor. And what are they looking from you? What do they want? Well, they want to look good. They want their church to prosper. They want to know what you can add to the church. And for many of us, we've decided that we're going to try and take the money and run it. And I want to preach to you, just for 30 seconds, a very different approach. That increasingly in a time of hyper-competition, and that's how I would characterize the church missions committee, they are getting requests for cash from everybody. Everybody. And it has stopped being a rational process. It's an emotional process. And how are the emotions tinged? They're tilted towards, it seems to me, the people who are inculcated into the very values of the church. Now, when I started in fundraising 30 or 40 years ago, I can't remember. So old. You know, the churches, it was sort of like you work at the post office, you have a job for life. Well, you get on a church budget, you'll never get off. You know these stupid things that you grow up with. Well, today, churches are pulling back from organizations. One of the reasons they're pulling back is the multiplicity of appeals. They simply can't deal with it, so they circle the wagons. I mean, very clearly, pastors are not trained, and deacon boards are not trained to deal with the multiplicity of appeals. They're deer in headlights. The second reason, though, that this is occurring is that many churches are fielding requests from people that they hardly know. Barry came, I think, one Tuesday in 2004, but now he wants cash from us. And they can't identify with you. And so when I don't get cash, I wonder, well, those heartless pigs. or worse vendettas. I can't comprehend. And so consequently, for many of us who are going out on missions that are denominationally based, we're hoping that we're going to have 5, 10, 15 churches that are going to snap attention and draw and send us checks. Large checks and routine and on time. First of the month. My bias, again, is that if we look at the people who are supporting missionaries today, the numbers of churches supporting missionaries is declining, not increasing. The average missionary is, I think, doing really well if they have 2, 3, or 4 churches supporting them. Doing really well. But what I want to suggest is that for the vast majority of us, rather than having, now this is not going to be true in every agency. For some agencies with a high degree of cultural loyalty, all the churches in the state of Wisconsin will snap to attention if Barry's going overseas to Kenya. But for others who don't have that cultural imperative, the snap-to-itiveness breaks down. And so as a missionary, what do you have to do to inculcate yourself in the church? Well, I think a couple of simple things. You have to show up and be a part of it. Okay? End of lesson. We can no longer have an air of entitlement towards churches. They simply do not necessarily want to do that. Some churches question the very basis of the missionary enterprise in terms of foreign lands, would prefer to do it domestically. I don't want to get into that, but nevertheless, it's apparent. And particularly for churches that are boomer dominated, they often do not have a world view. They often have a neighborhood view or a city view, but they very often don't have a world view. So without damning them again, I really want to talk about the hyper-competitiveness that you have and the disappointment that you may feel because you don't have 9 churches supporting you. It goes back to my bias, again, perhaps Jeff's and my bias, about face-to-face and individuals. That the vast majority, the first line of your support, unless you're heavily involved in the church, and they're going to give you a gift, but the first line of our tactics in raising your support is individuals. Now, churches are really, really valuable. And so the other side of this coin is, and I'm always asked, is it worth the effort? And it's usually phrased that way. And I want to say, I think it is worth the effort. I do think it's worth the effort. But I think it's a politicized effort, often. And the politics lean in your favor the more you're involved in the heart and soul of the church. The less you're involved, the less likely, from my perspective, they are to support you or to give you token gifts. Token being that out of their benevolence fund, they have an extra $350 and they write you a check at the end of the year. For many of us, we're looking to be part and parcel of the church budget. Good. Now, let me talk a little bit about prioritizing and strategy. Now, I've given some numbers on the notes. I don't want you to hold me to them. My point is very simply this. A percentage of your audience is going to give more than another percentage of your audience, which is going to give more than another percentage of your audience. And you're going to have to, as you talk to people, get a sense of what those percentages are. The reason it's important to classify your donors is because the classification dictates your strategy. You can put all your eggs in one basket. You just have to make sure that you watch that basket. And for many of you, the classification system is a stimulus for you to decide what you need to do. I was talking with one gentleman the other day, actually yesterday, who has lost a very large donor. When you lose a very large donor, it has a negative impact. Now, you sometimes lose donors not because of anything you've done wrong. Sometimes we lose donors because we've done nothing wrong, but we just ignored them and we made the assumption of loyalty. What I'm very clearly talking about is we want a collaborative relationship. For many missionaries, many, not all, perhaps not you, for many missionaries, 10% of your donor base gives anywhere from 50 to 75% of your dollars. For many missionaries. For some missionaries, it is not that markedly different. It is much more, if you will, democratically spread out. But for many missionaries, they know that Uncle Barry or their father's friend Jeff or somebody who is a vice president of so-and-so or somebody who they perceive could give them a larger gift. They indeed ask for the larger gift, and indeed the larger gift is given. Maybe as a lump sum, perhaps as a monthly gift, perhaps as a quarterly gift. Therefore, it skews their percentages. If you have all of your donors who are giving at the $25 a month level, you've also skewed your percentages, perhaps negatively. For most missionary donors, they have a mix of large gifts, regular gifts, i.e. monthly or quarterly, and small gifts, one time, two time. It's just the way it works out. For some organizations, they train their missionaries, if you will, to ask for monthly gifts. I personally like the concept of routinized, regular giving. I like it as a missionary because it allows me to know whose shoulders I'm sitting on when I'm overseas. And so my reflex reaction as I talk to people face to face is to ask for a regular gift. I sometimes leave it open. Sometimes I say, would you consider a monthly gift? If they say no, I ask them if they would consider being a monthly prayer partner with me. I want people that I can stand on and be a part of. Now, if your donor base breaks out that way, I think the critical point is that the vast majority of your donor base typically will give the smallest percentage of your giving. Now, here's what we do. Perhaps not thoughtfully, but we tend to do this. If, for example, 70% of your donor base as a missionary is giving 20% of your dollars, we tend to spend the most of our solicitation, fundraising, development time on the 70%. And we make the assumption that the people giving at higher levels will continue to do that. Typically, the inverse is true. I want you to make sure that you notice people who are giving you larger gifts. Why is that? Because I'm treating them different? No, because people who give larger gifts are more volatile, typically in their relationships with missionaries, and the tactics it takes to maintain that relationship are often different than the tactics it takes to maintain a $20 a month gift. For many people, if they're giving $20 a month, it's imperceptible in terms of their budget. If I'm giving you $5,000 a year, it's a little more perceptible. Now, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. It's merely, from my perspective, a function of tactics. Most of us spend the majority of our fundraising time at the wrong end of the giving spectrum. Now, we do that very simply because it's easier to talk to Barry, who's giving you $20 a month. It's a great time. We have coffee, we laugh, etc., etc. It's great. It's harder to make a call on Jeff McClendon, who's in an office, etc. He wears a suit, maybe a white shirt, and you have to sort of rehearse what you're going to say. And you have to do it all, and Jeff says, yeah, I'll give you 4 minutes. And so it feels cold. And so it requires a different set of tactics. The money, if I could just focus on the money. Don't read into this anything other than money. The money is at the cold-hearted Jeff McClendon.
Amen.
Cold-hearted.
Amen.
I would rather have you go through the rehearsal anxiety and get nervous and have the 4-minute conversation as opposed to the hour and a half with me at Big Boy. And I'm only giving you $20 a month. I want you to ask Jeff for the larger gift and to renew the larger gift and to give him a report and to do it all within 4 minutes. And to do it within 4 minutes, to rehearse at home in front of a mirror so I don't miss anything. Now, they don't tell you that at your mission agency. But that's how to raise your support. I would far rather, as a missionary, spend time with a nice old Barry McLeish at Big Boy. Go buy me coffee. Than to see that cold-hearted Jeff McClendon. I've said cold-hearted now 3 times.
I'm waiting for the kicker.
Yeah, a question about, again, over the years, you have someone who maybe started out with $20 a month.
Sure.
Do you ever go back and, maybe not the cost of living adjustment and all that, but just try to encourage people
Sure.
to up their giving? They started 20 years ago at $20 a month,
Yeah.
and over 20 years, of course, my expenses are.
I mean, the vast majority of people who do that are waiting for a clue or a cue from you to upgrade their giving. And a percentage of people will, and a percentage of people won't.
How would you approach that, though? I mean, just the cold fact that, cost has gone up, and salary's gone up, and responsibility's gone up.
Yeah, all that stuff. I would build it into my case.
In case that.
I take a little different approach when I try to get somebody to give me more money, not that I'm very good at it. But I take the approach that I have an opportunity that I think you would really like to be a part of. This new thing is
That's
happening
another good
in the
approach.
ministry,
Sure.
and I just think it's so cool, and maybe you'd like to give a little bit more for that.
Another approach is to convene all your $20 a month donors into some sort of mini lunch, dinner event and ask if God's leading some of them to upgrade their giving. Some will say yes, some will say no.
You recommend face-to-face to do that as opposed to?
I like face-to-face. I think there's not enough face-to-face in the missionary enterprise. I think that's why we're seeing declining support. I think clearly it's that. It's not because you guys are bad or stupid or going to the wrong place. It's all about how we're treating our constituents.
Because we don't see it as part of our job.
That's
Our
right.
job.
That's right. I think that's really true. And I think that reformation, if you will, has to take place in the training labs of the mission agencies. And I think the other, I'm pumped. I think the other thing, quite frankly, is we have to realize that it's going to take more time than 12% of my time to raise the support I have to raise. That's the other big hurdle. Most mission agencies are sort of quietly predicated on the notion that I'll work 40 hours a week, then I will raise my support. And for people who are over $85,000 a year, I think if you're spending less than 20% of your time, you're having a hard time hitting the numbers, unless you're from the background where my family was in the church for 26 generations and I'm blessed, and et cetera, et cetera. Most of your missionaries aren't good. Now, the reason we're prioritizing again, and as I said at the front end, many of you are going to have very different systems. The point I want to make is simply this. You might assign codes to your donors, whereas I have, and I just went through a simple exercise where number ones, if you will, can give you 3,000 or more. These are people who might give you 2 or 3 times a year. They will not support you monthly. They have several income sources, and your need is to contact them face to face. What I want you to do, quite frankly, as I go through them, is not to necessarily copy this, but to have your own system and to have your own implications in terms of your tactics. Number twos can give you $500 to $2,500 a year. They will be serious givers. They will give to multiple causes. Their income will come from 1 paycheck or 2 paychecks in a household. These individuals will tend to give quarterly or monthly if they're married. If not, they will give as frequently as you contact them. Your constituents each are going to mirror a different set of tactics. Where we make mistakes is that we try to bend people to our tactics, as opposed to listening to their tactics. You talked about listening to the church and doing something on behalf of the church. Your constituents will give you the same sort of information back. Listen to them, figure out how to operate. Organize, develop segmented and prioritized contact lists. You have to be organized to do this game. I don't care if you organize on computer, in your Palm Pilot or BlackBerry, or in a manila folder. Organize. And if you have coaches, have your coach help you to organize so that tactically you're going after people in a certain way for a certain set effect. Organize, and then listen. What happens if my organization is wrong or my tactics are wrong? Throw them out and change the tactics. Immediately. Don't try to drive things into the toilet that won't work for you long term. Feel free to change your tactics. If I approach Jeff the wrong way, maybe next time I'll go with someone with me. If I recognize that he only wanted to give one-time gift, maybe I'll say to him, I'd like to come back and see you. If I recognize that he's interested in this part of my work, but not in this part of my work, I'd like to say to him, I'd like to come back and talk to you more about this part of my work. Organize. Make your tactics mirror the reality of the people that you're talking to. Okay? Some of you have deer in headlights looks. All this organization changes depending on your ethnicity. If I'm an Asian woman, I'm going to be supported and mentored by a couple of people in a church, and that church and those couple of donors, they may write 95% of the entire cost of my support. If I come from a very large family that's extended, I might find that the vast majority of my support comes from that extended family. And I may spend 50 to 60% of my support raising time within the family. If all my support is going to come from 3,000 miles away, I'm going to have to sort of set up appointments, then take a trip to go and visit those people and spend a month out in San Diego calling on family, friends, etc., etc. If I'm a single woman, I might find that it's helpful to have an advocate or a mentor broker my relationships with some business people, particularly businessmen. If I'm a Christian single woman also, I might realize that the least solicited group of religious people in America today are professional Christian women. Least solicited. Least solicited. Not only are they least solicited, they're angry because the churches ignore them. I am telling you flat out, if I had to come back on the wheel, I would come back as a professional Christian woman. I would raise my support in 90 days. Question?
How do you recommend going about, like, because we've been talking about this a little bit, like, with our potential number ones? Like, does just Caleb go and meet, say it's a couple, does just Caleb go and meet with the husband over coffee, or do we both go and meet?
What feels most comfortable?
We don't know, we're trying to figure that out.
Well, then figure that out.
It depends on the relationship.
It really does depend on the relationship. There's some people where very clearly Caleb is the only one who should be there. There are going to be others where the people are going to give us a couple, and it's good to have a couple there.
Even for follow-up, that's the same way. Some
Exactly
churches want to see the family,
That's right.
Yeah.
and you gotta make an effort to get the family there. Others don't care.
Yep.
And you can just show up.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about practices. And again, I have a caveat. The caveat is that your mission agency may have a different prescribed manner of doing things. I want to be respectful of that. I want to be very respectful of that. However, I may tend to disagree. And so I'm speaking from biases that have tended to work with agencies and with groups that Jeff and I have worked with, okay? If it's different in your organization, we will simply make it work for you. For example, in some letters, in some organizations, I like the letter to have certain things in the first letter I send out. I like your picture in it somewhere. I like perhaps that prayer card. I really don't, just said that. But I like the picture. I like perhaps a map if I'm going to an area where the average person will not know where it is. I've often suggested to missionaries that they go to the store and buy 100 maps and then circle it in big red pen and say in the letter, open this up so you know where I'm going. It's called an involvement device. You can make any rules that you want to allow people to be interested in what you're trying to do. The big question about the first letter is always, do I ask or don't I ask? Well, I want to tell you flat out that you've asked by virtue of sending the letter. So just actualize it in your copy. Now, Jeff's a great tactician when it comes to communication. Are you going to talk about prayer witness this afternoon a little bit? So Jeff's going to talk about that. But I would actualize it. People know that you're on the hunt for cash to go overseas. It's okay. Make it important. Let people know where you're going. This whole issue of going overseas to a country where no one knows where it is, this is a barrier, what we would call a barrier to entry for me being involved in your ministry. So particularly, make sure I know where you're going. Figure out a way to do that. Maybe you want to look at a travel log that you sent to everybody over the internet. Maybe you want to send maps. Maybe you want to send pictures. You want me to get up to speed about where you're going. Don't assume I know where Kenya is.
Or what it's on.
Or what continent it's on. Don't assume. Okay? So you want to do that. I want to suggest too that if you're spending more than 7 months on your letter, you spent too much time. Just a heads up. I mean, Jeff's a great communicator. He's going to tell you to do it. But the person reading your letter is going to spend somewhere between 10 to 20 seconds on your letter. That's the amount of time. They're going to see if you messed up the spelling of Barry's name. They're going to find out what's in the PS. Jeff's going to give you all those hints. You don't want to spend an inordinate amount of time. This is not an English essay. You want to let people clearly know where you're going, why you're going, what you hope to accomplish, and what you want me to do as a result of reading your letter. What do you want me to do? Don't leave it to osmosis. Tell me what you want me to do. I would like you to pick up the response card. No, first of all, I'd like you to pick up the magnetized picture of me and Debbie and put it on your fridge. Just kidding. Tell your readers what you've been doing. Remember that the vast majority, I read a statistic, I don't know if it's true, but I read a statistic that 64% of all Americans should wear glasses and only 32% do. If that's true, that means the vast majority of people in this room are blind. So don't write single sentences. Write with paragraphs. Don't print it on red stationery like they do at Christmas when people get Christmas letters that are red stationery. You can never read it. Print it on white stationery. Print it on your organizational letterhead. Use a live stamp. Hand address it. Well, this is the age of computers. Like at 55, obviously you don't realize we can have labels, etc. You want me to read it. Hand address it. One of the missionaries I worked with sent their first letters out after they had crafted it. They hand wrote 46 letters. They raised half of their support on the first swoop. Everybody read the letter. They refined their list. They were desperate to go overseas. They refined and they looked and they did as personal as possible, and people read. It took them a truckload of time. But they went overseas within the first year of having decided they were going to go. Okay? They were desperate to raise their money. Be desperate to raise your cash. A word about your budget. The biggest problem, and I know many of you have large budgets, and I'm not suggesting that that's wrong, etc., etc. I want to ask about the person in the pew. If your budget is I'm making up numbers, if it's $84,000, it seems to me that you have to go to great lengths to ensure that me sitting in the pew and asking me for my $75 a month, what is the biggest issue I'm going to face in giving you $75 a month? Pardon?
I wish I had that much money.
I wish I had that much money, and that's the wrong issue. The biggest issue I'm going to face is, will it make a difference? That is the primary value problem that your constituents face. Particularly constituents who can't afford to give you much more than $25 a month. Your case has to answer that. All gifts are important. Every prayer is important. If you want me to give a large gift, talk to me face to face. But remember the person in the pew. My biggest problem, if I'm on fixed income, is will my gift make a difference? If I can't afford $100 a month, will my twice-a-year gift of $250 make a difference? Can I make a difference in what you want to do? And that's what stops gifts. It's not lack of cash. It's lack of value concern that I can make a difference in what you're doing.